Okay, how's everyone today? Pretty good? Good. I just want to remind you one more time, because it's coming up, is we have our COMPASS Festival this weekend at Shuming Guangchang. So welcome you to all come out and try that. It's from 12 o'clock noon, 12点钟. Saturday it goes until about 9 o'clock, and then on Sunday it goes until about 8 o'clock. So there's about 50 vendors, 50个摊位, selling all kinds of good food and drinks. And then we have, I think, 18 different bands and musicians, 乐团 and 乐家 and all of them playing, performing. So anyhow, come out to Shuming Guangchang and enjoy a good weekend. I think the weather is supposed to be nice. So that's always my main concern, is good weather. So yeah, hopefully that will be fine for everybody. Okay, so I thought I would start with this story here. Obviously, this is a big global news. Every day there's something new about this. And that's the whole war in Israel and Gaza Strip. And of course, as is the situation with many all wars, really, the civilians, the people who are not soldiers, are the ones that are suffering the worst. I think I shared with you this word before, but the word civilian. Okay, and what does civilian mean? Yeah, basically, if you're not a soldier, you're not a abingge or junren or whatever. We call you a civilian. So I think everyone here is a civilian right now. Maybe you used to be in the military. But yeah, we say civilians. So, in all wars, it seems that civilians are the often or usually the innocent victims of these wars. So this article, of course, is talking about that, and it's obviously a very bad situation. So it says here, wounded people, foreigners, escape war-torn Gaza. Now, Gaza, I think you know where that is. It's that, we call it the Gaza Strip. It's that very small area in the southern corner of next to Israel, between Israel and Egypt. And when we say war-torn, what does that mean? Yeah, or just war, really, hurt, with widespread war, lots of war. So if we say a war-torn country, a war-torn area, region, torn, it comes from the word tear, right? So it's a very common expression. We say war-torn. And it usually is to describe an area, a place, a city. So why don't we say together, war-torn? War-torn. Okay, so let's see. Well, yeah, but devastated doesn't have to be war, right? You can have devastation from a typhoon. But here in this case, of course, war-torn specifically refers to war. Some war that you could say devastated by war or hit hard by war. Okay, so it says here, ambulances yesterday transported wounded residents out of Gaza for urgent medical care in Egypt, with hundreds of desperate foreign passport holders also starting to flee the territory devastated by 3 weeks of war with Israel. Okay, so you know what an ambulance is, right? Okay. Yeah, we see even in Taiwan they often put the English word ambulance on the vehicle. So why don't we say together ambulance? Ambulance. Okay. So yesterday transported wounded residents out of Gaza for urgent medical care. So of course, the situation there is very bad. With hundreds of desperate foreign passport holders. So of course, a foreign passport holder is a person who holds a foreign passport. Like in Taiwan, I'm considered a foreign passport holder. Okay, desperate, of course, the word desperate. If you really, really want something, you need something, you're hungry for it, you can say they're desperate for food, they're desperate for help, they're desperate for rest. I'm desperate for some vacation, anything that you really, really want or need. Okay, so why don't we say together, desperate? Desperate. Okay. They're starting also, okay, so these foreign passport holders and others are starting to flee. Flee means 逃跑, right? To run away from the territory devastated. Now, here's that word devastated. You were saying earlier, we could say war, devastated, war. When anything is devastated, there's terrible destruction, lots of destruction. Okay, so let's say together, devastated. Devastated. And I've said this to you before, but devastated doesn't have to be physical destruction. It could be emotionally, right? If you say she was devastated after her boyfriend broke up with her, right? Okay, or he was devastated after he lost his job. Okay, so we can be emotionally devastated as well. Okay, by the 3 weeks of war with Israel. Okay, so let's read this together. Ambulances yesterday transported wounded residents out of Gaza for urgent medical care in Egypt, with hundreds of desperate foreign passport holders also starting to flee the territory devastated by 3 weeks of war with Israel. Okay, so yeah, and yeah. I think there's a couple factors. One is Egypt only recently opened their border. Egypt was not allowing them into Egypt. And second of all is, I think it's easier said than done to flee. I've heard, and I don't know, you hear different reports, but I've heard that the Hamas, the terrorist group, they prohibited people from leaving a lot of their areas. So they did not allow people to leave in some cases. But in some cases, Gaza is quite a small area, right? And I think it's 2.3 million people. So it's not easy for you just to leave and go somewhere else. I mean, there's really not a lot of places to go, especially, Egypt, they closed the border up until now, recently. And so you couldn't leave, you couldn't go to Egypt. Maybe it was difficult. Maybe there's nowhere to go. I mean, it's just hard to say, in many cases why they couldn't just leave. Because I'm sure that people did want to leave. I mean, they knew what was coming. So yeah. Okay, it says here, the evacuation of the first people to escape war-torn Gaza provided a rare glimmer of hope in an otherwise desolate humanitarian crisis, with 8,796 people killed in Israeli bombing, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Okay, so evacuation, we've talked about this before, right? If you evacuate, it means you leave a place, usually for a reason, like an emergency. So we could evacuate this building if there was a fire, right? Or maybe if there's if you live up in the mountains and there's a big typhoon coming, the government might ask you to evacuate your home or your village because there might be 土石流. So to evacuate, that's E-V-A-C-U-A-T-E, or evacuation, which is a 名词, okay? So we often use that word. So why don't we first say this word, evacuation. Evacuation. And then let's say it as a 动词, to evacuate. To evacuate. Okay, so the evacuation of the first people to escape, and here's that word again, war-torn Gaza, provided a rare glimmer of hope. Now, this is a good expression here. Glimmer, what is glimmer? Yeah, it's like if, well, not really wink. It's glimmer, it's like, yeah, if it's, sometimes if you, yeah, okay, maybe, if you're looking at a cloud and the sun is behind the cloud and a little bit of light is coming through here and there, or maybe if you look at gold, 黄金, and the light is shining on, and you see a little bit of it's like sparkling, like sparkling light. So there's some words that are kind of similar to this. I mean, Sometimes we say shimmering or glitter. Well, we have glittering, sparkling. So these are all words where, you know, you have the light and it's kind of like sparkling. Like, again, if you have a piece of gold or water, you know, when the sunshine is hitting the water, like the ocean, and the water seems to sparkle or glimmer or glitter or shimmer. These are all similar kinds of words. The idea of the light is kind of jumping up in little pieces here and there. I think you know what I mean. But yeah, we often use these words glimmer. So why don't we say these together? Glimmer, glimmer, shimmer, shimmering, glitter, glittering, sparkle, sparkling. Yeah, so these are all kind of similar. But here, this word is used in a different way. And it's used, often we see this expression, to a glimmer of hope. What does that mean? Yeah, a little glimpse, you know, a glimpse of hope. You know, glimpse, we can also say that too. Sometimes you hear people say glimpse of hope. Okay. Glimpse is a good word because a glimpse is a small look at something. You know, for example, let's say you're walking through a big crowd and you see your friend over there, but you just see him for 1 second, right? He's walking the other way and there's many people. You say, oh, I saw a glimpse of him. Or maybe you go to, you hear that some famous person is coming to Taiwan, like, I don't know, Tom Cruise, okay? And he comes to the airport and you're walking through the airport and you say, oh, I caught a glimpse of Tom Cruise. I just saw him very briefly. I just saw him, you know, he was walking through. I just saw him real quick. So a glimpse of hope means just a small view of hope, a little bit of, you can see a little bit of hope. It's the same idea, glimmer of hope. It's like you see a little bit of hope there. Maybe not much, but a little bit. Okay, so yeah. Now we do not use these words in that regard. We don't use them. We don't say a shimmer of hope, or well, maybe we could. Maybe we could see that. But we do not say a glitter of hope or sparkle of hope. We could say a glimmer of hope or a glimpse of hope. Let's say this word together: glimpse, glimpse. And we often use the word to catch a glimpse. Okay, so that word. To catch a glimpse. I caught a glimpse, or I want to catch a glimpse of Tom Cruise. You know, it means just to see them real quick. Okay, so this is a common word. Okay, or expression. So why don't we say together, glimmer of hope. Glimmer of hope. And of course it says rare. Recently there has not been much hope in Gaza. So this is a rare glimmer of hope in an otherwise desolate humanitarian crisis. Okay, besides this glimmer of hope, it's been desolate. And what does this word desolate mean? If something is desolate is a word that gets used in many different ways. For example, if you describe a place as very desolate, usually it means there's nothing there. It's maybe abandoned, and it might be desolate for different reasons. Sometimes a place is naturally desolate, right? When I think of desolate places, I think of the desert, right? 沙漠, right? There's nothing there. It's just sand, right? Or you think of, you go to some place and there's no trees, there's no plants, there's nothing. It's just, yeah. But other times a place is desolate because of a disaster, right? Maybe you could say the typhoon left the island desolate. Okay, it blew away everything. Okay, so desolate here, of course, is because of a war. So it's a desolate humanitarian. Humanitarian, of course, means having to do with humans, people. Crisis, right? This is a crisis of people. And this whole area, of course, this area has been desolated. We can use the word desolate as a 动词 too. Okay? So why don't we say together, desolate. Desolate. Humanitarian. Humanitarian. Crisis. Crisis. Yeah, of course, a crisis is any big problem, like a crisis. We can have a health crisis, we can have a personal crisis, or we can have a national crisis, or we can have a city crisis. There's many kinds of crises. Okay, or crises. crisis is singular. If you want to say it for plural, it's S-E-S at the end, yeah. So C-R-I-S-E-S, crises. You could say, currently there are many crises in this country. Okay, so of course, people were killed by Israeli bombing, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Okay, any questions? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, if you think of gold or diamonds, right? Or something like that, or like sunshine shining on the water, we can say it glittered, or, there is a funny saying. What? Wink is your eye. Are you thinking twinkling? No, we wouldn't say that. But twinkle, that's also a kind of a similar idea, but we often use the word twinkle for what? Stars, right? You've heard that song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So when you think of a star and it's shining in a very small way, it's just making that, we say twinkling stars, okay? So but you can see these words all have some similarity. They all have to do with light, don't they? Light. So why don't we say that word too? Twinkling, or twinkle. Okay. So yeah, but there's a funny saying, I'll share it with you. It says, maybe you've heard this. Oops. Okay. This is a English expression. All that glitters isn't gold, is not gold. So that means, when you see something that looks very shiny and bright, it doesn't mean it's gold. What does this expression mean? It means that sometimes when you see something that looks great, it might not be great. Okay? So not usually. It's not usually applied to people. It's more applied to a thing or a situation. Yeah. So we say all that glitters is not gold, okay, or isn't gold. Okay, so let's say it together. All that glitters is not gold. All that glitters is not gold. Right. So if your friend says, wow, I think this place looks amazing, it looks wonderful, we should invest in it, you think, oh, no, all that glitters is not gold. Maybe it's not that great, okay? Okay, so let's read this together. The evacuation of the first people to escape war-torn Gaza provided a rare glimmer of hope in an otherwise desolate humanitarian crisis. With 8,796 people killed in Israeli bombing, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Okay. I'm sure there is expressions for that, but I don't know. I mean, you mean an expression or a word? A noun? A fraud? I don't know. Yeah. Charlatan? I don't know. That might be another word. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other words. Pretentious and, a fake. We could use fake as a means, right? F-A-K-E. Shame. S-H-A. Oh, sham. Sham is more used to describe a situation, not a person. Yeah. So yeah, there's different words we could use to describe someone who's not real. Yeah. So yeah, there's a variety of ways. Okay, so it says here, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to continue until victory over Hamas, whose brutal October 7 attack sparked the latest conflict, the deadliest in decades of unrest between the two sides. Okay, so what does vowed mean? Swear, to promise, right? If you pledge, okay? We've learned these words before, I think, but if we say he pledged, okay, he swore, okay, of course this is the word swear, okay, he promised, okay, that's more of a basic word, okay, and there's probably other words too. So why don't we say together, vow, pledge, swear, promise. And these words can be verbs or nouns, right? I don't know about Taiwan, but in America, when people get married, right, 结婚, in a church, usually they go to a church and they say their wedding vows. Okay, we use the word vow in that situation, where they say, I vow to be, through sickness and death and life, all that. I forget how they say it. So anyhow, yeah, we call that a wedding vow. Okay, it's like a pledge. Yeah, in sickness and death, and I forget. Yeah. You can go look it up. So anyhow, he vowed, he swore, he pledged, he promised to continue until victory over Hamas, whose brutal October 7th attack sparked. Okay, now brutal we've talked about several times. Brutal means what? Cruel. Yeah. Obviously, if you've seen the TV and YouTube and video coverage of what happened on October 7th, it was really shocking and terrible. And so it was very brutal. There was no mercy. People, men, women, children, families were killed. So why don't we say together, brutal. So this brutal attack sparked, and of course, I think spark means to trigger. Remember, to start. Okay, there's all kinds of different words, but spark, is for fire, right? When you have a fire, there's many sparks that go up into the air, and one spark can start a big fire. So we say to spark means to start, to trigger. So spark the latest conflict, the deadliest. Okay, that means it's killed more people in decades of unrest between the two sides. Okay. And unrest, of course, is just another way for conflict, and violence, and trouble, unrest. You can say there's a lot of unrest in their family right now, or there's unrest between the two countries. It doesn't mean violence all the time, but it just means trouble. Okay, so let's read this together. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to continue until victory over Hamas. Let's say it again. Continue until victory over Hamas, whose brutal October 7 attack sparked the latest conflict, the deadliest in decades of unrest between the two sides. Yeah. So yeah, there's been a lot of unrest over the decades, but this is the worst. That's a photo. Okay. So here it says a phalanx of 40 white ambulances streamed through the Rafah border crossing as crowds of foreign and dual national families gathered nearby, hoping to leave the catastrophic conditions of Gaza behind them. Okay, now the second word here is a very interesting word. It's a word I know we've never talked about, but a phalanx. Does anyone know what this means? Yeah. So if you like your ancient history, it's a military formation. It's a way of organizing soldiers. Okay. And so during the Roma, the Roman army was very powerful, right? And they would organize the soldiers in a line. So they would line up, and they had a special formation that would use to attack. If they were going to attack, they would all line up, and maybe you've seen movies like this, right? And there's soldiers in the front, and they're holding their shields, and then they move forward, and the enemy, they push the enemy back. That's called a phalanx. That formation, that way of organizing the soldiers. So here, of course, that doesn't mean the ambulances look like that, but basically it means a formation. And of course, when we say formation, formation is basically a way of organizing something, right? Like, during, I don't know, 双十节 or whatever, sometimes the military will fly airplanes or helicopters, 直升机, overhead, and sometimes they're in a line, or sometimes they're in a V, and those are all different formations, right? Or, when you have, sometimes there's a parade in Taichung, and people are moving in a certain organization. Maybe they have a certain shape. We call that a formation. It's a way that they're organized. So phalanx basically is a group, an organized group of ambulances. Maybe they were in a row, or they were in a cluster or a group. Anyhow, they were in a special formation. They stream through the Rafah border crossing. Now, border crossing, of course, is a place where you can cross the border, right? Like I remember in the past, going from Hong Kong into China, there was always a certain border crossings that you could go across into China from Hong Kong. So Rafah is one of the border crossings between Gaza and Egypt. Now, stream through, right? Stream means there's like a line of people or line of cars or vehicles going through somewhere. So, for example, you could say people streamed through the doors of the library, or a group of people streamed into the restaurant. It means usually a line of people, or line of cars, or line of vehicles. So stream comes from the word like river, right? River is like a stream is like a small river. Okay. So why don't we say together, streamed through. Streamed through. And then, of course, we don't want to forget this word. Now, PH starts with an F sound, and it's phalanx. Okay, so let's say together, phalanx. Phalanx. Okay, it's not a very common word, but if you like Roman history, we know this word a lot. Okay, so they crossed across or through the Rafah border crossing as crowds of foreign and dual national families. Now, dual national means what? They hold two nationalities. Of course, I have many friends in Taiwan and other countries that have two passports, right? Maybe they have a Taiwan passport and a U.S. passport, or a U.S. passport and a Canadian passport. So anyhow, we say dual national. Let's say together, dual national. Dual national. Okay. Hoping to leave the catastrophic conditions. Now, this word we've talked about before, but catastrophe, if we put an E at the end, P-H-E, it becomes a 名词, right? And what would be another word for catastrophe? Disaster, I think, yeah. Well, chaos is more like 乱, right? But a bad disaster. I think disaster would be a good word here. So we could say, instead of catastrophic, we could say disastrous, right? If something is a big disaster, if we want to turn disaster, if we want to turn disaster into a 形容词, we say disastrous, right? Oops. Sorry, S. D-I-S-A-S-T-R-O-U-S, disastrous. Okay, so disaster, disastrous. Catastrophe, catastrophic. Okay, so anyhow, same idea. So why don't we start with the 名词 and say it with a P-H-E, okay? Catastrophe. Catastrophe. Okay, and that's a 名词, but here it turns into a 形容词, an adjective. Catastrophic. Catastrophic. Okay, in the same way, let's say as a means disaster, disaster, and then as a 形容词 disastrous, disastrous. Okay, so we could say disastrous conditions, catastrophic conditions of Gaza behind them. So if you say I'm hoping to leave something behind me, it means I'm hoping to get out of there, right? Now you could say I'm hoping to leave he hopes to leave his troubles behind him. He hopes to leave his sickness behind him. He hopes to leave his bad job behind him. This is all very important expression, right? Here, of course, they want to leave the catastrophic conditions of Gaza behind them. So basically, you want to get out of something. You want to end it. You say, I want to leave something behind me, or they want to leave something behind them. Okay, so that's a good expression. Okay, let's read this then. A phalanx of 40 white ambulances streamed through the Rafah border crossing. Border crossing. As crowds of foreign and dual national families gathered nearby, hoping to leave the catastrophic conditions. Let's say it again. Catastrophic conditions of Gaza behind them. Okay. Now you notice something here. The only people they're allowing to leave, I mean, of course, it sounds like people who are sick and need medical care, they can leave. But the only people it sounds like they can really leave are foreigners and dual national families, right? They're not just saying, okay, anybody from Gaza can come into Egypt, because I'm sure Egypt does not want all these refugees coming into their country. Now, I'm sure if they could, many Gazans would leave and go to Egypt. They would get out of there. But right now, I think it sounds like they're limiting this access to Egypt. Okay, so it says here, at least 2 children were seen in the ambulances, one with a large bandage wrapped around his stomach, as medics examined the wounded and transferred them to stretchers. You know what a stretcher is? When somebody is hurt, it's usually something you pick up and you carry people and they lie down on it. You usually need you always need 2 people to carry a stretcher, one in the front, one in the back, and you pick it up and carry it. Now, this is different from a, in Taiwan, every day there's ambulances, for motorcycle accidents or whatever. And there they have it looks like it has wheels on it, right? That has a different meaning to it, a different word, because a stretcher you have to pick up. So that we often call it's got a funny word. It's called a gurney. Okay. It's like a bed on wheels, and the person lies down, and then they can pick it up and they can put it in the ambulance, and it can roll because it has wheels. So we call that a gurney. Why don't we say together gurney? Gurney. And then a stretcher is something that 2 people have to pick up and carry, and usually can fold it up. Why don't we say that too? Stretcher. Stretcher. Okay. And you know what I think you all know what a bandage is, right? If you cut yourself and you need to put something over it, we say a bandage. Yeah. So anyhow, there is a funny word. It's actually very common. People say Band-Aid. And to my knowledge, Band-Aid is a 品牌. It's a brand name. And in America, this brand name Band-Aid, it became so common that people use that. A Band-Aid is just a small, it has adhesive, right? It sticks to you, right? So when you have a cut, you just put a Band-Aid on something. Yeah, I think sometimes they add a hyphen here too, Band-Aid. But I think it's actually a brand of 品牌. But now it's one of those words that because everyone uses it, they started using it. I'll give you another example. There's many brand names that have become common words, like ping pong, Xerox, right? What was it? Xerox. Yeah. So ping pong, everyone says ping pong, but ping pong is a ping pie. It's a brand name. So it's actually the official name is table tennis, right? I don't know. But another one is Xerox, right? If you want to photocopy something, normally the word is photocopy, right? But a lot of people just say Xerox. I want to Xerox something, and that's a brand. That's a ping pie. So these words, many of these words like ping pong or Band-Aid or Xerox, I'm sure there's many other words. They became words, normal words, because everybody used them. Okay, so why don't we say together bandage, bandage, Band-Aid, Band-Aid. Okay. Now, Band-Aid always has that sticky, it's like tape, right? You stick it on something, it sticks by itself. A bandage could be anything. It could be big, it could be small, yeah. Sometimes instead of bandage, we say dressing. Okay. As a 名词, not like to dress your clothes, but you say they put a dressing on his wound. So you could say a bandage or a dressing means something that covers it. Okay. Okay, so let's read this together. At least 2 children were seen in the ambulances. One with a large bandage wrapped around his stomach. As medics examined the wounded and transferred them to stretchers. Okay. Now, a medic, of course, is not a doctor. A medic is somebody who is trained to provide medical assistance, but they're not a doctor. It's a little bit like in America, Taiwan, we say EMT, right? EMT is somebody who's trained. Like if you call for a, EEGO 119 and the ambulance comes, there's usually the guys, they know how to treat you a little bit, right? To maybe bandage you or put you in the stretcher. If there's an emergency, they can help. We call that an EMT. It's a special, I think it's called emergency medical technician or something like that. But yeah, you have to get training to be an EMT. So we could say a medic EMT is a kind of medic. Yeah, you could say paramedic. A paramedic. Also, same idea. That's an R, sorry. R-A, P-A-R-A-M-E-D-I-C, paramedic. Why don't we say together, medic, paramedic. Okay, so yeah, it's that idea. Okay. So yeah, so water outage. Sometimes I see a message in my elevator on the wall of my elevator. It says there's a water outage between at 4 o'clock and the next day at 3 o'clock. I don't know. They outage. So it means it's a cut, a water cut, a power cut. Okay, so why don't we say together outage, outage. Okay, so the least of the problems are the shortage of water and a power outage. The bigger problems, there are bigger problems such as a bombardment. Now, I think we've said this before. 动词 is to bombard, right? Means to shell. To use usually a big gun to fire a big shell and shoot at something. It's not like a small gun. It's a big gun. We say, that's actually the technical word is artillery. Yeah. In Taiwan, every time there's a yanxi, you see all those big guns and they're shooting into the ocean. We call that a bombardment. Okay? So why don't we say together, to bombard. To bombard. Bombardment. Bombardment. Of course, when you look at this word, you see the word bomb too, right? But we can be bombarded with other things too, right? You can say the restaurant was bombarded with complaints. All the customers are complaining. I don't like this. The food's too cold. This is no good. We say he was bombarded with complaints. Okay, it means it's like he's being attacked or lots of complaints coming at the same time. Because a bombardment is just not shooting at something one time. It's shooting many, many times at something. Okay, all together. So their bigger problems were the bombardment. They were afraid many families were martyred. Now, this is a very interesting word, M-A-R-T-Y-R. Martyr is what? What is martyr? Martyr can be a means or, if you die for a cause, especially a religious cause, okay? Now, I guess you could say he was martyred for a political cause, but if someone was killed or dies for a special cause, we say they are a martyr, and that's a person, a martyr. But here, of course, martyred becomes a 动词. They were martyred. He was martyred for his religious beliefs. I'm sure, if you look at history, there are many, many people who die because they have a certain belief in something, right? And they were killed. I know in Christianity, there's many people who were killed for their beliefs at certain times. So anyhow, we say he is a martyr or they were martyred. Okay. Everybody understand that? Yeah, you could say they were sacrificed, but martyr has a very strong idea of someone is killing you for your belief. You could say sacrifice can go over. It can be used in a very broad sense, right? Yeah, but it's very intentional. If someone kills you or kills somebody for their belief, then they are martyred. It's not like you went out and I guess you could, I don't know. Anyhow, I think you get the idea. This word gets used in many different ways. But yeah, why don't we say together again, martyr, martyr. And then as a 动词, martyred, martyred. Yeah. So I don't quite understand the question. You said, yeah. Well, the reason why in a lot of, I'm not saying all, but in a situation like this, for example, Hamas, okay, if you have Islamic or Muslim extremists, when we say extremists, it means they have extreme ideas. I think there's a strong idea that if you are killed or martyred, you go straight to heaven, right? So, if you were fighting for a holy war, they say holy war, right? A holy war fighting against the non-believers, then you will go to this, heaven, and you'll get all these benefits in heaven. So for them, being martyred is okay, right? It's great. You get killed for a holy cause, you go straight to heaven, everything's good. So I think, yeah, it's a different idea that many other people hold. And I'm not saying that, we're talking about Muslim extremists in many cases. I think they're different kinds, just like there are different kinds of Christian ideas and beliefs. There's different groups and with Islam beliefs, there are different groups and different ideas. And so, in this case, it's interesting though that she said many families were martyred. She didn't say many families were killed. Remember that. So if you said many families were killed, okay, yeah, of course they were killed. But the fact that she used the word martyred means that they died for a special cause. They died in a holy war, maybe. They were killed by the enemy, maybe a unholy enemy or something like that. So this word it has a lot of meaning to it, right? Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's obvious, pretty obvious. But, if someone gets killed in a car accident out here, or somebody gets killed in a disaster, or normally if even in just a normal war, someone just says, oh, they were killed in the war. They were killed in a car accident. We do not use this word martyred. If we use the word martyr, it means there's something, a special cause or religious idea going on there. Okay. So anyhow, yeah, this is a very interesting word. I don't know. Joan of Arc, I mean, she's obviously a very legendary character, particularly in the Catholic Church. But I don't even know if all Catholics believe that story, of Joan of Arc. I mean, yeah. So I don't know. Interesting story. I mean, obviously she existed. She was a real person. But, there's all these miracles connected to her story. So anyhow, yeah. This is the situation. She said many people were martyred. Okay, let's read this together then. Jordanian citizen Saleh Hussein said she received word in the middle of the night that she was on the list for evacuation. Evacuation. We face many problems in Gaza, the least of which were the shortage of water and the power outage. There were bigger problems such as the bombardment. We were afraid. Many families were martyred, she said. Okay. So it says here, news footage showed families struggling to carry their worldly possessions, rushing through the heavily fortified crossing toward Egypt, which was expected to admit at least 400 foreign passport holders and 90 of the most seriously wounded and sick. Okay, now footage, of course, means a news video, like a video. Okay, showed families. Now, this is an interesting expression, worldly possessions. Basically, that means what you hold in your, what you belongs to you, your, if someone asks you, what's your worldly possessions, you would say, well, my house or my car, or my clothing and my shoes and my, everything that belongs to you. Okay. But they throw in the word worldly because there are things that we possess that are not related. I mean, they're not physical objects, right? But these are physical things, right? Things you can pick up and carry. Okay. So why don't we say this together? Worldly possessions. Worldly possessions. Okay, so they were struggling to carry their worldly possessions, rushing through, but they're moving quickly through the heavily fortified crossing. Now, fortified means, if you you build for it's this word is usually related to military. So if you build up a fortification, it means to protect something against a military attack. So, it used to be in the old days, if you went out to Jinmen or Matsu, right, you would see lots of fortifications on the beach, to protect against attack, or, there's many places where there's lots of fortifications. It's a protection, military protection. So if you say something is heavily fortified becomes a 形容词. It means heavily protected, but protected in a military way. Okay, so why don't we say together, heavily fortified. Fortified. Okay, so they were going towards Egypt, which was expected to admit, Egypt was going to allow in at least 400 foreign passport holders and 90 of the most seriously wounded and sick. I assume this group here these people are Gazan, people from Gaza, not foreign citizens. Okay, so let's read this. News footage showed families struggling to carry their worldly possessions, rushing through the heavily crossing. Let's say it again. Heavily fortified crossing toward Egypt, which was expected to admit these 400 foreign passport holders and 90 most seriously wounded and sick. Okay. Let's see. Let's just read one more paragraph here. It says, the first group of mostly women and children arrived in Egypt, and officials said on the condition of anonymity, as TV images showed parents with strollers and elderly people clambering off a bus. Now, if you clamber off something, this word down here, clambering, clambering means almost like climbing. So if you climb off a bus, you come off of a vehicle. Often used if you're getting off of a vehicle, but yeah, it's kind of like the word. It's a little bit similar to. I mean, obviously you're not climbing a mountain, but not necessarily. It's a hard word to describe, but yeah, it's almost. I always hear this word for like you clamber off a bus or clamber off a train, or maybe not an airplane, but when you have a lot of people kind of climbing down from a bus or a vehicle, we say they clamber off. Usually it's something large, right? We don't usually say he clambered off a car. We might say a bus or a train or, something bigger. But yeah, and usually it's like a group of people. Yeah, but it's kind of like to climb down from something, to come down from something, like a large vehicle. So why don't we say together, clambering. Okay, so of course, this official, was speaking. When we say on the condition of anonymity, it means they were speaking, but they did not want their name to be used. So anonymous. Remember, we talked about the word ANONYMOUS. Anonymous means with no name, right? So if you say he gave money, he donated money anonymously. If you 捐钱 to someone, you don't use your name. Almost secretly, you don't use your name. We say anonymous. Or here it says on the condition of anonymity. It means I will talk to you. I will talk to this teacher, but you cannot use my name. There's in journalism, in Xinwen, we often say they will speak off the record. Means that I will tell you something, but you cannot use my name. Okay. So why don't we say it together? Anonymity. Anonymity. I'll just write the other word for you. We haven't said this word in a while, but we say anonymous. Okay. So if you say, who gave that money? And you say, oh, they were anonymous. They didn't use their name. Why don't we say together, anonymous? Anonymous. Okay. So what is stroller? Yeah, I think we could say baby carriage, but nowadays we say stroller more. You know, okay, baby carriage. Yeah, when you take a baby out, a small child or a baby out, there's a special thing. It's like almost like a tuicha or whatever, and they sit inside. Although nowadays, whenever I see a stroller, I'm always looking to see, is it a baby or a dog? What's inside? Yeah, in Taiwan, I think usually it's often a dog. Right? I'm like, what? So you think, oh, it must be a baby, and you look inside and there's a dog, or maybe two dogs. Yeah. Why? I heard that if you have a dog in a stroller, you can go into a store, right? Told me that. Like the dog is walking, you might not be allowed into certain places, but if the dog is in a stroller, it's okay. I don't know. That's what somebody told me. I don't know if that's true. But you know what I always think? I always think the dog has 4 legs. Why can't he walk, right? You know, he needs the exercise. He has to 运动, right? So I always think it's kind of funny. And sometimes they're big dogs too, and not little dogs. Oh, okay, maybe. But I'll be honest, when many Waigoren come to Taiwan, they think this is very funny because they think, why is the dog in a stroller or baby stroller? Well, you mean like a motor scooter? Yeah, that's a very curious thing in Taiwan. I think it's kind of cute. Many foreigners think that's very charming. I tell you what most of my foreign friends say. They said American dogs or Western dogs, they would never stay on the scooter. They would jump off, right? So they're very amazed that the Taiwan dogs are very relaxed, they're very calm. They don't seem to mind. They're very well trained. Like I see sometimes they'll stop at a Hongri red, and the dog will get out and run around, and then he'll get back on the scooter. So yeah, so Taiwan dogs are kind of special. But yeah, it's kind of funny the dogs in the stroller. And again, sometimes they're not little. If they're little tiny dogs, okay, maybe I think they get tired walking. But sometimes I see pretty big dogs in a stroller. So anyhow, let's say yeah, I've seen twin strollers. You mean for like 双胞胎 or something like that? Yeah, I've seen that. That's kind of cute, where you have two together. So yeah, or yeah, there's all kinds of strollers nowadays. There's kind where you can sometimes you can put your grocery shopping on the back and the baby on the front. And, yeah. Anyhow, let's say together stroller, strollers, and then that word baby carriage, baby. Yeah, carriage is like like a carriage, like long ago, like when you have a mat, right? We say a carriage. Horse will pull the carriage, but of course this is a very small, much smaller vehicle. Now, of course, stroll means just to walk, right? I strolled down to the 7-Eleven. I strolled downtown to see the concert. It means I just walked. Yeah, and yeah, often when you say to stroll, it has the idea of walking very casually. Yeah, easy walk. You're not walking really fast, or you're not walking a super long distance, but you're just kind of casually walking, somewhere. Okay, so you can say I took a stroll. So stroll can be a 动词 or a 名词. You can say I took a stroll down to the 7-Eleven to buy a newspaper. Okay, so they showed parents with strollers and elderly people clambering off a bus. Okay, they were climbing off a bus. Okay, let's read this then. A first group of mostly women and children arrived in Egypt. An official said, on the condition of anonymity. Anonymity. As TV images showed, parents with strollers and elderly people clambering off a bus. Clambering off a bus. Right. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Any questions about this story before we go on? Anything? Okay. Yeah. What's my opinion? You mean of the whole war? Oh, you mean a bigger war? Hamas? Yeah. Well, it's a great tragedy for both sides, right? I mean, it's a tragedy for the Israeli people. It's a tragedy for the Palestinian people. I do strongly believe that Hamas knew exactly what they were doing when they attacked Israel. They knew what Israel would do, right? So I think they were using the situation to their own benefit, right? Because when you attack Israel like that and you kill all those, over 1,700 or whatever it was, Israelis in that very brutal way, you know what Israel's going to do, right? They're going to retaliate. They're going to attack you in a very severe way. Hamas knew that, right? Of course they knew that. So what's their goal, right? Their goal is to make Israel into the bad guy by attacking Palestine, right? And what does Hamas hide? Does Hamas have an army that just comes out and fights Israel on a battlefield? No, where are they? They're hiding amongst the civilians, right? So, of course, they knew when this happened, when they attacked Israel, they knew that thousands of Palestinians were going to be killed, right? So, in my opinion, if you say, I really think that, the Palestinian people, we should feel sorry for them. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy, and you can see this, right? But, to say, oh, this is all Israel's fault would be a very misleading thing to say, right? Because Hamas is the one that started this, right? They're the one. Now, of course, one can argue about the historical situation between Palestine and Israel and its decades and decades of problems. But where did this situation start? Well, it started with Hamas, and they knew, that I honestly believe they knew, okay, we're thousands and thousands of Palestinians are going to get killed because of what we do. But okay, that's fine. We can do that. So in my opinion, they're not helping their own people, right? They're not, that's not it. And Israel in the meantime, Israel has always had a very strong sense of, we need to survive as a small country, right? So it's very much, Israel always said, if you attack us, we attack you. And I think when Israel looks at Hamas, they say, now we really have to fix this. We have to solve this problem once and for all, right? We can't just say, oh, okay, no problem, peace, and we'll let Hamas build up again, and we'll wait till the next time, right? No, I think Israel now says, okay, Swana, we're going to deal with this once and for all. We're going to wipe out Hamas. That's what Netanyahu is saying. We're going to wipe them out, because just say, wait to the next time. Then what happens again? This was the worst ever attack on Israel. And so I really think that it's a terrible situation for everyone. But I do think if you want to look at who started this particular war, it's very obvious who started it. And again, I think they did it for a purpose. Keep in mind that Israel and Saudi Arabia were about to sign a peace treaty, right? That was a radical, revolutionary thing, is for Saudi Arabia and Israel to sign a peace treaty. They were about to sign a peace treaty. And what did Hamas do? They attacked Israel. And so now what happens? Everything's up in chaos. So everything is connected, and of course, Iran is a big supporter of Hamas, and Iran hates Israel. Iran and Israel are just, we say, arch enemies. If you say arch, ARCH, arch enemy means you're the worst enemies. And so Iran is behind a lot of this too. I mean, it's very clear. Iran is behind Hamas and Hezbollah and all these groups. And Iran is using these groups to attack Israel. So my hope, of course, is that this war doesn't grow to include a direct war with Iran, because Iran is, that's a big country too. But I do think that, you have to look at the roots of this problem and who is manipulating different things. And again, the worst victims are the Palestinian people, but it's not because, there's all these other things that are going on that have created this terrible, the Israelis and the Palestinians have suffered terribly because of this. And I really do think that it's one of those things that's it's a shame. And again, I'll just say one more thing is, people say, let's just have peace. But does Hamas want peace? No, I don't think so. They don't want peace. They have a slogan. They say from the ocean to the sea. When you hear them saying that, what does that mean, ocean to the sea? It means that we want to wipe Israel out. There's no room for peace in their mind. They say Israel should disappear. We want it all. And so when you have an enemy that says, we want you gone, we want you to disappear, we don't want you there, we don't want you to exist, then there's no way to talk, right? You can't say, oh, we're going to negotiate peace, we're going to stop fighting, and it'll be okay. No, they want you to be gone, wiped out, done, killed. So I think where Israel is coming from, they're saying, look, sure, it's terrible for the Palestinian people, they're caught in the middle, but Israel says, no compromise. These guys attacked us, we're going to wipe them out. So yeah, it's a terrible thing. Yeah. So there's a word we use. I'll just teach you this word. It's a good word. If you say, we hear this word sometimes, we say existential. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm spelling that right. Existential. Did I spell that? Exist. Exist is E-X-X-T-X. Yeah, exist, right? So, yeah. I think I'm spelling that right. Existential crisis. So when we say Israel always feel like they're facing an existential crisis, please correct me if that's spelled wrong. But existential crisis means that this is a crisis of whether or not you exist, right? It means your enemy wants to kill you completely or destroy you completely. So either you fight and you exist, or you stop fighting and you do not exist. So if someone is facing an existential crisis, it means that this is a fight for their survival. Yeah, live or die. Either you exist or you do not exist. So Israel has always been in an existential crisis. Why? Because many of the countries, or most of the countries around them. Now, fortunately, Israel has peace with Jordan and Egypt and, of course, other Arab countries. But many of these countries did not want Israel to exist. They don't want it to be there, right? So we say Israel always faces an existential crisis. That's why they're so firm, and their response is so strong, right? Is you either fight and you survive, or you stop fighting and you disappear. Okay, as a country. Sure, I mean, Taiwan as free independent nation, right? Is Taiwan want to exist as it is today as a country, or does it want to disappear? Yeah, I mean, obviously you have a big country next door that doesn't want Taiwan to exist, that refuses to acknowledge Taiwan's existence. Why can't, when we go to the Olympics, why can't Taiwan use its name Taiwan? It has to say Chinese Taipei, because this other country says, no, Taiwan is not a country. Taiwan does not exist as a country. So therefore, this is where I think Taiwanese have a lot to learn from the Israelis, right? Because Israelis have fought very hard for their freedom, men and women both, and they fight hard. And they're willing to sacrifice themselves for that freedom. Again, I'm not sure if I've spelled this word correctly. Does anyone know this? Is it okay? Did I spell that correct? Okay, sorry. Sometimes when you write things down, they don't look right. So yeah, existential is a good word. But yeah, the Israelis have always, they've been surrounded by enemies who would love to see them gone. And so I think, okay, so yeah, maybe that, yeah, so it's X. Is that correct, right? Okay, yeah, I thought this word looked weird. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, existential. I think that's, well, I mean, yeah, genocide's a very, very controversial word. Obviously, yeah, I mean, I know the Palestinians would probably say the Israelis want to kill them all, but I don't think that's true. I think, this is a very, very, very controversial subject, but it's a tough one. You know, I know that there have been talks about peace and creating a Palestinian nation, a separate nation for the Palestinians, many, many times over the years. But I think there's an essential problem. That is, on the Palestinian side, groups like Hamas, they don't want to talk about peace. They don't want Israel to exist. So how can you talk about peace if if the other side doesn't want you to exist? So yeah, I think, and maybe in a way that's similar to Taiwan, right? Because we talk about peace, but what does peace mean? Does peace mean that Taiwan doesn't exist as a country? I think that's a question everyone needs to ask here. Peace at what cost, right? Peace means we can have peace, but it might not be a very pleasant peace. It might not be a peace that you like. You know, peace is a very broad term, right? Yeah. So anyhow, I think this is a good. It's good. I think what's happening in Israel is a way. Perhaps it's a good way of thinking for Taiwanese to think. Okay, what is it that we want to protect or defend? But again, it's a terrible situation, and what happened to the Israeli people, the Israelis that were killed on October, whatever that was, 7th or whatever that day was, horrible. Just some terrible stuff. I'm still shocked by it when I see the news. And then, of course, we see all the suffering that's going on in Gaza Strip because of the response and the reaction. But, you know, I really, yeah, it's a tough one. Really tough situation. Yes. You think? Mhm. Well, I mean, I think one. Mhm. Right. The latest thing I heard, and I think this is probably where it might go, is they said that if, I mean, this is a, but if this war ends at some point, the United Nations would probably have to, in their own force, to occupy or defend Gaza Strip. Basically, create a United Nations government administration for Gaza Strip. You know, and because you, again, 2.3 million, it's like the size of Taichung population. You know, you need to have some sort of administration there. And to be honest, I don't know if Israel even wants to administer 2.3 million Palestinians. So I think the United Nations obviously is concerned about the whole humanitarian situation. So from what I read, was the United Nations says, okay, well maybe we can figure out a way to have peace. Then we send the United Nations in to administer, basically to create a government and some military, you know, peacekeepers, as they say, in that area to keep the peace. Now, boy, that's that's tough because I think it's with the, the Kongbu funds and whoever inside the group there. Not, I'm not saying all Palestinians, but the Hamas and other groups who want to fight. This would be a very, very, very difficult situation. But remember, when Gaza Strip was given its own separated, when it was given to another group, Palestinian group called Fatah, and the Hamas kicked them out. Basically, there was a group control for the Palestinians, but the Hamas came, basically killed the guys, or took over power. So, yeah, it's such a tough situation. Um, it's one of those things that affects everybody, not just Israel and Palestinians, but people all over the world, I think. Um, okay, so yeah, it's one of I think obviously it's good to stay in touch, to follow this, to think about it, um, and think about what. Okay, so here's a very different story. I thought this would be interesting to look at. It's funny because in Taiwan we have Qingmingjie, right? But in Philippines they have another day. It's called All Saints Day. Yeah, which is kind of interesting. So I thought we could take a look at this. in Mexico, I know in Mexico, and I don't understand this very well. Haven't studied it. They have a day called the Day of the Dead, I think. And just yesterday we had what was our Halloween, right? So they're all kind of related to each other. I'm sure if you go back and do the history, there's a connection between some of these days. We have All Saints Day, I guess was Halloween, or a Halloween day. And for Halloween, I notice in Taiwan more and more children are doing trick or treating, right? Do you know what this? You know what this is, right? Yeah. So what do you do with trick or treating? We can use this almost as a 动词, right? To go trick or treating. You dress up, usually kids, and you carry a bag or something, and you go to different houses, right? And you say trick or treat, right? And what are they supposed to do? Give you candy, right? Okay. So it's supposed to be fun, right? You go to different houses and people prepare candy or snacks or stuff, and they give you this. The idea, though, is if you don't give them candy, they might play a trick on you, right? Now, I don't think that happens too often, but yeah, it's the idea of trick or treat. You give candy, and it's usually for kids, not for adults. So yeah, we say trick or treat. Why don't we say together, trick or treat? Trick or treat. Right. So I notice in Taiwan, some groups will organize like a trick or treat activity for children where they go around and people give them candy. And I did this when I was a kid. Even in Hualien, the small international community there had a trick or treat activity. And I remember you come home and you have all this candy, right? And you go through all your candy and make sure see what you got, what kinds of things people gave you. So anyhow, trick or treat is fun. And of course, we have Halloween. Okay, and that was yesterday. I think I'm spelling that right. Halloween. Why don't we say together? Halloween. Halloween. Right. I was sitting at just 2 days ago or 3 days ago. I was coming home at night and I was sitting on my motorcycle waiting at Taiwan Dadao and Wenxing Lu, big intersection, waiting for the light to go green. And I saw a giant frog, Xinhua, and then I saw somebody, and they were all dressed up in costumes, walking across the street. I thought it was very funny. I was like, I don't see that every day, So yeah. So anyhow, here it says Filipinos throng cemeteries for All Saints Day. Now, what does throng mean? We talked about this before. Yeah, it's a 动词. But if you move in a big crowd, like if you crowd into somewhere, like you crowd into a 百货公司, or you crowd into the bus, so you can say they thronged onto the bus. They thronged into the department store. Here this says they thronged cemeteries. And a cemetery, of course, is where, where they bury people, right? Where there's tombs and graves. So why don't we say a word together? Throng. Throng. Cemeteries. Cemeteries. And you know what a saint is, right? Like we have a holy person, somebody who's done something great and they become a saint. They're like a special, like, we talk about in the Christian church, they have St. Peter or St. Paul or St. John. These are saints. So here this day, the special day is called All Saints Day. Okay, so it says here, Filipinos carrying flowers, candles, and bags of food yesterday thronged cemeteries across the Catholic majority Philippines to pay their respects to dead loved ones on All Saints Day. Now, this idea of pay your respects, this is a very common expression, right? If you say, I want to pay my respect to somebody, this can mean two things. One, it could be like this for somebody who's dead, basically, right? But it could also be like, somebody who's alive, right? So if you say, I want to pay my respects to so-and-so because, maybe it's their birthday, or maybe, something, it's a special day for them. So I visit their house to pay my respects. When I think about this often, I think in my mind, it seems like maybe for an older person, like somebody who you really know, maybe your grandfather or somebody who's older than you pay your respect to them. You come by to say hello, say hi, how are they doing? So pay your respects. It's kind of like to give your respect to someone. Okay, so of course they were carrying flowers, candles, laju, and bags of food. Okay, so let's read this together. Filipinos carrying flowers, candles, flowers, candles, and bags of food yesterday thronged cemeteries across the Catholic majority Philippines. Let's say this word again, Catholic majority Philippines, to pay their respects to dead loved ones on All Saints' Day. Okay, now of course when we say loved ones, we're talking about usually our family, relatives, loved ones, because those are people you love. Now I forgot to mention Catholic majority. You notice here this becomes a 形容词 because it has a hyphen here, right? So Catholic, of course, refers to 天主教, right? So we say Catholic majority means that the majority of people in Philippines are Catholic, 天主教. Okay, so it says, yeah. You can show your respect in many different ways, but I think when you say pay my respect, it often means like you visit them, you actually go there. Now I could show my respect to anybody, right? I could show my respect to, but to pay your respect, it has the idea like you're actually going there to see someone, maybe to visit them or spend time with them. So it's similar but slightly different. Yeah, you hope not. Yeah, or at least yeah. Okay, so it says here hundreds of thousands of people fanned out across sprawling graveyards in the capital, Manila, to hold picnics on tombs or pray quietly in front of a relative or friend's final resting place. Now, I'm sure you probably heard this term before, but it's a very, very common term, final resting place. What does that mean? Your grave. Yeah, it's your last resting place, right? But this is a very common expression, final resting place. So if you say, oh, where's his final resting place? Oh, he's buried over there in that city or town. Okay, so let's say together, final resting place. Final resting place. Now, when we say fanned out across, what does that mean? Yeah, it's spread out across. You know what a fan is, right? In China, we have those beautiful fans, right? With, when you a fan, right? It has that shape, right? So when you fan out across, it means like you spread out across, right? You're fanning out across. So how do you say fan in Chinese? San, yeah. So of course it could be electric fan, but here it says to fan out across means to spread out across the sprawling graveyard. Now sprawling we've talked about before. Sprawling means covering a very large area, right? For example, we could say Taichung is a sprawling city. It from the mountains all the way to the ocean. It's a very wide area. You could say the sprawling district of Beitun. It means it covers a very large area. Okay. Okay, so why don't we say it together? Sprawling. Sprawling. Yeah. Taiwan also has some sprawling graveyards, especially up on Dadushan and some of these places. You see all these this very broad or wide graveyard. Okay, so let's see this together. Hundreds of thousands of people fanned out across sprawling graveyards in the capital, Manila, to hold picnics on tombs or pray quietly in front of a relative or friend's final resting place. Final resting place. Right. So it seems like it can also be kind of fun, right? You have a picnic on the I don't know, in Taiwan for Qingmingji, do people have picnics? Do not. I don't know. Yeah, you just do the 扫墓 thing, right? Okay. Yeah. You mean fan? Yeah, why not? If you're hot, why not? You mean to use a fan like this? A man? Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're hot, yeah, whatever. Yeah, what do you think? It looks too feminine, or okay? I think it's okay. Um, I used to see sometimes in Taiwan. Sometimes you see old guys and they pull up their shirt and they're fanning themselves and it's very hot. And yeah, I think okay, good. That's a good way to cool off, right? So yeah. Okay, so it says here, among the visitors at Manila North Cemetery was Zenaida Cruz, 77, who walked slowly with her husband to the tomb of her parents and grandparents to offer candles and a prayer. Now I think you know in Catholic churches they often burn candles to the dead, right? It's kind of like a prayer. So the candles have a certain, okay? So let's read this. Among the visitors at Manila North Cemetery was Zenaida Cruz, 77, who walked slowly with her husband to the tomb of her parents and grandparents to offer candles and a prayer. Okay, that's a photo. Okay, says Cruz used to leave flowers at the gravesite, but inflation has pushed prices of even simple bouquets beyond her limited budget. As long as I can walk, I will still visit because this is a tradition, Cruz said. This tradition won't fade, but of course, it won't be as grand as before when there were many flowers and many candles. Okay, so here we have, what is inflation? Everyone's talking about inflation. How do you say in Chinese? It's, yeah, pong, yeah, tong pong, yeah. Your money goes smaller and smaller, right? Yeah. You know, I was at my favorite cafeteria the other night, Tan, right? And this has really happened, right? I always get the same amount of food, right? I don't, and I went there, and usually it's like, I don't know, eat by 10块 or eat by 20块, right? And I mean, I take a lot of food, so it's quite a bit. But I went in there and I put it down. The lady's looking at it, and she says, "eat by 70块." And I thought I heard her wrong. Honestly, I looked at her and I said, you know, I was thinking, I thought maybe I'm not hearing this correctly. And then she said again, she said, "eat by 70块." So then I thought maybe I'm really. So I just pulled out 200块and gave it to her. And of course, she gave me back 30块. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, "What's going on? You know, is this a new employee or maybe what's wrong? You know?" But I thought, really? So I thought next time I'm going to go back and see if it's still that high or if it was just that woman, you know, maybe she doesn't like 外国人 or something, you know. But yeah, I was very shocked. I was like, what? 170块? I mean, I can go to a normal restaurant, you know, eat 170块. So anyhow, it's inflation. Why don't we say together, inflation? Inflation. Okay. So she used to leave flowers, but inflation has pushed prices of even a simple bouquet. And what's a bouquet? A bunch of flowers, okay? So I was sitting at my friend's restaurant the other day. He's an American guy, and his neighbor came and gave him a bouquet. It was his birthday. And she said, "Happy birthday," and she gave him a bouquet of roses. And I thought, wow, your neighbor is very nice. But yeah, a bouquet is like a bunch of flowers, okay? And of course, we say this as bouquet, like K-A-Y. So let's say together, bouquet. Bouquet. We don't pronounce the T. Remember, we don't say that T. One more time, bouquet. Okay. So even a simple bouquet is beyond her limited budget. So even if she wants to buy a simple bouquet, she cannot afford it. It's beyond her budget, her 预算. Okay. So she said, as long as I can walk, I will still visit because it's a tradition. This tradition won't fade. What does fade mean? F-E-E. Yeah, to slowly disappear, right? Sometimes if you buy a shirt, right? Maybe it's a red shirt, and after you wash it many times, it becomes lighter and lighter and lighter. We say my shirt is fading because I've washed it so many times, or my jeans are fading because they've been washed too many times. So fade means the color generally gradually disappears. So she said this tradition will not fade. It won't disappear. But of course, it will not be as grand. Of course, grand means big or fancy as before, when there were many flowers and many candles. Okay? So let's read this together. Crews used to leave flowers at the gravesite. But inflation had pushed prices of even simple bouquets beyond her limited budget. As long as I can walk, I will still visit. Because this is a tradition, Cruz said. This tradition won't fade. But of course, it won't be as grand as before. When there were many flowers and many candles. Okay. So it says here, the annual ritual is an ancient Christian tradition honoring all saints and martyrs. There's that word martyr again, who died for the faith. In the deeply religious Philippines, the day is a public holiday to enable people to travel hours to visit grave sites in the far-flung parts of the country. Okay, so there's some words here. Now, we've talked about this before. Ritual means what? Yeah, I think closest word is ceremony, right? Like if you go to the temple here, you visit the miao, right? There's many rituals, right? We say Buddhist, maybe they're Bojiao or Daojiao or whatever. We say a Buddhist ritual or Buddhist ceremony. Of course, we're talking about a Christian ritual or ceremony. You go through a ceremony. It could be a big one. It could be a small one. So why don't we say it together? Now, of course, the T is the ch sound, right? So rich. Okay, so this is an annual ritual, once a year. It's an ancient Christian tradition honoring, to give your honor to all saints and martyrs. So there's that word martyr, who died for the faith. So, of course, a martyr is someone who died here, of course, who died for their Christian faith. So that's what it means. Okay, and then below here it says, in the deeply religious Philippines. Now, of course, if a person or a country is deeply religious, it means they're very, very religious. Religion is very powerful, very strong. So in the deeply religious Philippines, the day is a public holiday to enable. Of course, enable here means to allow, okay, to allow people. If you enable somebody to do something, you allow them or you make it possible for them to do something, to enable people to what? To travel hours to visit grave sites in the far-flung parts of the country. What is far-flung is a great expression. What does that mean? I think I heard someone say it. We say remote. Remember the word remote? Yeah, far away. Yeah, but I think that word remote is a good word. You can say remote. So, Philippines has many, many islands, right? So if you said a far-flung part of the island means a very remote or far away part of the island. What would be a remote part of Taiwan? I don't know. I think of, Orchid Island or even Lishan, right? It takes a long time to get up to Lishan or, somewhere very far away. Okay. So why don't we say together, far-flung? Far-flung. Okay. So yeah, maybe they have to fly or take a boat or, take a bus. It takes a long time to get there. Okay. So let's read this together. The annual ritual is an ancient Christian tradition honoring all saints and martyrs martyrs who died for the faith in the deeply religious Philippines, the day is a public holiday to enable people to travel hours to visit grave sites in far-flung parts of the country. Right, okay. Yeah, so if it's a public holiday, yeah, it's a day off. Just like we might say in Taiwan, like 228or Qingmingjie or Zhongqiujie, those are public holidays. Means that the public has a day off. Okay. I guess non-public holidays would be like Christmas, right? People think of it as a holiday. I mean, for some people, it is kind of a holiday, but it's not a public holiday. It's not like everyone gets that day off. So yeah, that's another way of saying it. In Thai, yeah. Far-flung means far away. It means very remote. It's not near. It's on the way out somewhere that's far away from everything. So like we said, someone said Orchid Island, Lanyu would be considered a far-flung part of Taiwan, or Yishan, because it takes a long time to get there. So it's kind of a far-away place to get to. Okay. Everybody understand that? Okay. So it says here, Manila Police District Director Colonel Arnold eBay, I think it's eBay or iBay, said, I don't know, eBay sounds like the website, said that he expected about 1 million visitors to Manila North Cemetery, where poor families live alongside the dead in shanties and mausoleums. Now, this is very interesting. So 1 million visitors to one cemetery. That's pretty crazy, right? Just one cemetery, 1 million visitors. Okay. And what's even more interesting is that in the cemetery, poor families live alongside the dead in shanties. So there are actually people living in the cemetery. Okay. Now, this word shanty is a very interesting word. Does anybody know what that means? Yeah. So sometimes you hear the word shanty town. Yeah, it means a very poor area, where the buildings are not very well built. Maybe they're made out of wood and metal pieces. And when I think of a shanty town, everything is very 暂时. It's very temporary. It doesn't look like it's meant to be there long term. I'm trying to think. Taiwan doesn't really have any shanty towns. Maybe a long time ago. But yeah, if you go to places like Southeast Asia, Dongnanya, or Africa, or sometimes in a poor area, you'll see a shanty town, or we simply say a shanty. So it's just a community or district where the houses are very small and kind of not well made. Everything's kind of Jiufan. Oh, okay, so Jiufan was a shanty town before. Okay, yeah. I know that even in Taipei, long time ago, there were certain areas where they, near the Huochezan, and where they had these, where there were many small buildings, and there was no plan, right? Nobody planned it. They just sleep in. Everybody just built their houses there. So why don't we say together, shanties, shanty town. Now, this word mausoleum is also a very interesting word. Does anyone know what it means? A very big tomb. Now, a mausoleum can be it could be like a building almost, But often in a mausoleum, there's not just one person buried there. Maybe a whole family or many generations. They're buried in the same big tomb. In Taiwan, I sometimes see mausoleums, not very often, but sometimes you'll see a very big tomb and the whole family is buried in this one big tomb. But if you go to some places in other countries, the mausoleums can be very, very large. It's almost looks almost like a city. But these houses or mausoleums are really just for the dead. They're not real people, living people living there. So let's say it together, mausoleum. Mausoleum. Another place you would see a mausoleum if the person was very, very famous, you know, like a very famous person. Maybe when they bury him, they build this big monument to him, and he's buried inside, and that's his tomb. Okay. So yeah, this is very interesting. Let's read this together. Manila Police District Director. Okay, and this word, I'll just say Colonel. Colonel. So Colonel Arnold Ebay said that he expected about 1 million visitors to Manila North Cemetery. Where poor families live alongside the dead in shanties and mausoleum. Okay, let's one more time. Shanties and mausoleums. Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I didn't realize that people lived in the cemetery. Yeah. Okay, so we're out of time, but you know, I would always suggest that if you want to keep reading these, you can always find these stories online. This is today's newspaper. You can go check it out and practice at home. So anyhow, one more time, COMPASS Festival this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, Shimin Guangchang. I hope to see you there. I'll be there all day, both days. So yeah. Okay, thank you. Oh, and if you want, I have some promotional cards here. You can pick them up and give them to your friends. So yeah, I have some up here.